If you're sitting next to someone, it's because you know them well, I assume. The other virus, be mindful of phone courtesy. Please turn your phones to silent, the other virus that we can all control. Emergency exits, basically where you came in, or alternatively to your right through the doors here, which will also take you out in the same general direction. Obviously don't use any lifts. Toilets are through the door on your right as well. Go to the very end and make sure you come through the correct doors. There are several identical looking doors on your way back. So I'll get things underway. My name is Gerhard Velitis. As President of the Astronomical Society of South Australia, it's my pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. We have a great speaker lined up, which we would have liked to have seen a few more people attend, but thank you all for being here. And in future, as I said earlier, you may need to attend in person anyway, because live streaming looks impossible at this stage due to changes in policy and equipment at the Adelaide University end here. So, welcome to our monthly meeting. Our mission is to observe, understand, share and enjoy the wonders of the universe. The Astronomical Society of South Australia acknowledges and pays our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land, sky and cultural beliefs. Now, tonight's program is fairly basic. Main presentation to begin very shortly, followed by some announcements and heads up for upcoming events, and a close and supper at the back where you came through. So without further ado, our key speaker tonight, we're very lucky to have a very busy Edward Robinson come and join us to speak about how he founded Robinson Aerospace with a mission to inspire students to pursue careers in STEM by providing hands-on experiences. Robinson Aerospace delivers RASCube, a flatpack satellite kit, and I won't steal any more of Edward's thunder. I think he has an amazing story to tell. So, ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Edward Robinson.
Testing. Oh, it does work. That's a nifty microphone. Thank you to everybody who has come along. My name is Edward Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO of Robinson Aerospace Systems. We're actually a STEM education company based here in Adelaide, but we deliver STEM through space, because what's more exciting and inspiring than space? So tonight I'll tell you a little bit about how I started the company, and I'll get all the way through to the main event, which is actually launching student experiments into space, which we did about a month ago. So we'll start with what RASCube is, our classroom satellite kits, and then I'll talk a bit more about the journey from this big ambitious idea that started in high school all the way through to today, and then I'll go through how we actually built and launched a satellite within Australia, which is quite a complex thing, as you can imagine. And at the end, we'll get to any questions if anybody has any. So, at the moment, about half of all jobs with workforce shortages are in STEM-heavy areas, while 75% of all new jobs require STEM skills. So this is showing there is a huge demand for STEM at the moment, but there's not enough kids actually pursuing STEM, because 50% don't feel engaged in the classroom. Now, for those who have kind of a business mindset like I do, to put that into dollars and cents, if just 1% of Australia's workforce changed into STEM roles, GDP would rise by $57 billion, according to PwC, which is very significant. 1%, that's nothing, right? So, what do we do about that? Well, about 3 years ago, Robinson Aerospace was formed with 5 key objectives. Of course, the main one is to inspire young people to actually pursue these careers in STEM. And we want to find really exciting ways for kids to be able to do that. You know, we don't just want textbooks that kids use but don't fully, grasp where it's actually used in the real world. We want these students to be learning stuff in an exciting way that make sure they remember it, so they understand it, they realize why it's important. They don't just, pass an exam and then forget about it, but they actually really grasp what's important about that topic. And the last one there, number 5, is reduce teacher workload at the same time, which is a difficult thing, but anyone here who knows a school teacher will know that they are very overworked. I think it's about 15 hours unpaid per week overtime on average amongst teachers in South Australia, so it's quite significant. Now, how do we do that? RASCube. RASCube is a flatpack satellite kit that puts satellites in the classroom. So the kids build the aluminium structure, they build the electronics that go inside, they then put the solar panels on it, they put the antennas on it, and they eventually turn it on and actually get the data in the classroom. So these guys don't go to space, but they do all the same things that real ones that go to space do, to try and show students what satellites actually look like and try and put space tech into their hands. Once it's turned on, there's about 50 different types of data inside, things like orientation, acceleration, GPS positions, magnetic fields, and it collects all of that data and sends it all wirelessly to a computer, where we then have software which displays it so the kids can do experiments. For example, they'll use it in a physics class to learn about momentum and inertia, they'll use it in a maths class to learn about area or trigonometry, or they'll program it in digital tech. So there's a whole bunch of ways that they can use these satellites once they've done the actual assembly itself. Progress so far. In 3 years, we've delivered over 1,400 of these to schools around Australia and also universities in, I think, about 10 countries. So we're starting to get some traction, which is good. I think this year we're on track to have about 15,000 students within Australia assemble a satellite because of RASCube. So a lot of students are building this stuff. About 150 Australian schools. Obviously, I couldn't put the full list there, but there's some of the kind of main ones. All right, that's enough about what RASCube is. That's not what you're here for. That's just the kind of intro about what we actually do. I'll give you one slide about what CubeSats are, because this is not a CubeSat lecture. That is a whole another topic which I could talk about for many, many hours. But traditionally a satellite used to be the size of a bus, or a small bus. Huge things, they cost billions of dollars, huge rockets to launch them, but as time goes on, technology gets better and better, and these things get smaller and smaller and smaller, until eventually you have CubeSats, which is a 10-centimetre cube-shaped satellite. They do very similar things, and in most cases the exact same things, as what the huge bus-sized satellites do, except they're much lighter, they're cheaper, they can be built using off-the-shelf parts. You can literally go to CubeSatShop.com, buy a satellite computer, buy a satellite structure, and build the satellite and then launch it for literally a few $100,000, which, is a lot of money still, right? But compared to $1 billion bus-sized satellite, a few $100,000 is pretty damn good. So this is a huge revolution in space technology that started in the early 2000s. Coupling that with reusable rockets like the SpaceX Falcon 9 makes space so much more accessible, to the point that startups like us can literally get involved and put experiments that were made by high school students into space on a SpaceX rocket. All right, how did all of this start? That is me in 2008. That is not foreshadowing at all, that is completely coincidental. If you asked me at the time what I wanted to do, it would have been like a demolition man or something. I like to break stuff. I also like to make stuff, but that's just a kind of cool photo. But then somewhere around year 10, I think early year 10, that would have been 2019, I think, I saw a video of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket landing after delivering satellites into space. And when I first saw that, I was like, no way you can do that. You cannot, land a rocket that's been into friggin' space. Like, that's impossible, right? But the more research I did, the more I realized, wow, this is not CGI, this is actually happening. There's people out there that are building these things and actually launching them. And there was a very, very distinct moment for me where it was like, that's what I want to do. I want to work on space technology. Whether it's rockets, satellites, I don't care. I want to get involved with space tech. Here's a video of what that looks like for those who may not have seen it. Don't worry, there's no sound on it. Here it comes. Literally a ship floating in the ocean. Like, for scale, that is the height of a 21-story building. That is huge. There's some more scale. There's some people at the base of the rocket. Like, just, you can't imagine it. Like, to land that so smoothly on a floating barge in the ocean is just unimaginable. And that's why I got so excited about this stuff. So, as a kid in school who wants to get into space, what do? Well, you can go and eventually finish school, go to uni, get a degree, and then maybe get an entry-level job at one of these companies where you're pigeonholed into some very small, minuscule task. I'm quite impatient, so I didn't want to do that. Instead, I started Project Summit. I started towards the end of year 10 and went right through year 11. The goal was to build a model rocket that worked the same way that real rockets that go to space do. That means there's no fins on it, there's no fins for stabilization. Instead, you have electronics inside that move the rocket motor so that as the rocket goes up, the rocket motor rotates, and that's what steers it instead. That was the primary objective. The second one was to make everything as overkill as I possibly could, right? Like, I didn't know much about engineering, but I knew that if I just made a part that didn't work and then made it again that didn't work, made it again, I knew if I keep doing that, eventually I would learn by just kind of brute force and failure. So that led to a rocket that was completely custom, made the carbon fiber for it, all the 3D printed parts for it, designed the circuit board and the software and the mathematical algorithms to actually control it. The launch pad as well was pretty cool. The launch pad had like pneumatic systems to pull back the tower and electronic clamps and all sorts of crazy stuff. Just to really push the limits of what I could learn as much as possible. Like, I knew this wouldn't work. It wasn't about would it work or not. It was about how much could I learn from doing this huge project. I worked on this guy every single day for 364 days, like literally like doing my homework in like recess and lunch, rushing home from school and working on it to midnight. And as you can see on the right there, the first launch did not go very well. Literally caught on fire on the launch pad. Didn't even lift off. Couldn't have gone worse, quite honestly. But that wasn't the point. Everything on that rocket was developed by, just a process of iterating and failing on those parts. The one thing I couldn't make, though, was the rocket motor. Because if I made the rocket motor, it's the equivalent of making a bomb in Dad's shed. You don't want to do that. So I had to purchase that, and they're very hard to get. The only place I could find one was from a local pyrotechnician who had it in storage for a long time, so the repellent absorbed moisture, and it didn't really work. So that's why it caught fire. There was a second launch. The second launch didn't go much better. It went up and did like a 180 and then fell down. If anybody wants to see the videos of me developing it and the launches, then that QR code will take you to that. But I guess the point is just learning through failure. Year 12 came along, last year of high school, and things got pretty intense with the subjects involved with trying to get the best ATAR that I possibly could. That means no time to build rockets. Very sad. So instead I made up for it by making my Year 12 electronics project a satellite. I call it the CubeSat POC, proof of concept. And the goal here was to build a satellite that wouldn't actually go into space because I was in school and didn't have any money, but would do the same things as closely as possible. So, how do I design and simulate the structure of that? How do I design the electronics that power the computers or the power systems? How do I design the communications? And I built all of that in about 3 months. Did it work? No, of course it did not work at all. It didn't do anything really. It looked cool, but the electronics didn't work at all. But nonetheless, I learned a lot from it about what's in CubeSats and how these CubeSats work. And my passion for CubeSats kind of just continued up from there. So at the end of school, I had this huge passion for space, this huge passion for engineering. And throughout school, I ran a few businesses as well. I forgot to put a slide in here about it, but in year 9, I started my first business selling t-shirts. I sold that business for $1,500, which is not a lot of money, but to a kid in year 9 with no job, that's a lot of money. That's a big deal. So that was pretty cool. Then in the later years of high school, I was running an eBay store, buying parts directly from suppliers overseas and selling it for a profit on eBay. That built up to a point where I was able to buy me my first car, which was nice. So I kind of had this little entrepreneurial streak, and I was following people like Elon Musk, Richard Branson, these crazy entrepreneurs, and I was always like, I want to go on some crazy startup venture one day. I want to do something that's just nuts that you wouldn't think of doing. And eventually, I had that opportunity. School was out the way. I didn't need to worry about school. And I figured what better time to take that risk of starting a startup than now. I don't have a mortgage to pay. I don't have a family to support. Like, if things go terribly, terribly wrong, like the worst thing that will happen is I'm a few years late to my degree, So not too bad. So that started Robinson Aerospace Systems. with the mission and stuff that I've already told you guys about. How did I start it? Day one, I knew that I needed to make a prototype that was a bit better than the thing that I made in Year 12. So I could use that prototype to then actually go to school teachers and get pre-orders from them. So the first thing I did was raise $25,000. This was very, very tough, right? Like you're an 18-year-old kid, you just finished school, and you don't know anybody, especially nobody with money, right? So how do you find $25,000, or at least somebody to trust you enough to give you that money? My first reaction was, okay, I'll go to the Australian Space Agency. They've got money, right? So I go there and I schedule a meeting with one of their teams, and I pitch to them. And they're like, you know, this is great, but we can't put money in this. And I don't blame them. I mean, I was dressed like that. And like, it's taxpayer money, right? You don't give taxpayer money to an 18-year-old kid. So that didn't work out, but I kept pitching to literally everyone I knew. And eventually, after about a month of doing that, I found a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend way down the line who happened to have just sold their business and wanted to support some project with it and get involved. So I was very thankful to that person for putting those funds in. That paid for parts and machines required to produce the prototypes of RASCube, which I then used to pre-sell to schools. And throughout this stage, as I said, I didn't know anyone. I went to school in the Barossa. Like, there's no one in the Barossa that does space stuff. So I had to meet as many people as I could in the education sector, in the space sector, other entrepreneurs, you know, people in government. So this period for me was just any event that I can possibly find in Adelaide to do business or education or space. Like, I was there trying to meet people, which was difficult. I used to be quite a shy person. As you can see, I was a geek, right? I was a nerd. You know, I didn't talk to many people. So going to these big events and meeting these people, that was a tough thing, but I'm kind of thankful to myself for putting myself out of my comfort zone to do that. Once I got those pre-orders, then we had to deliver. And I mistakenly set a big grand event where I had 80 people there, all the first customers there, and I was going to give the first customers the first RASCube kits. When I scheduled the timeline for that event, I was a little bit too ambitious, and I ended up needing to work extremely, extremely hard, long hours, probably the most difficult time of my life, to get those delivered on time. But I did. There's me presenting, and that is the RASCube V1 kits on the right there. It was a big relief to literally get that done on time. Like, I was developing the product. It was just me and the company. There's no one else, just me at this stage. I was developing the product while I was manufacturing it, which is like crazy. Like, designs kept changing. It was a huge mess. But we got it done. And then I worked really closely with all of the schools who purchased it, all the teachers, the students, to get as much feedback as I could. RASCube V1 was a very rushed product. It was a minimum viable product, if you will, to try and test the market, see if there is a need for it, see what the teachers think, and collect feedback. So I spent a lot of time meeting more people, going to more conferences, and just listing all the feedback I got from that product. Throughout this period, we had big plans for more stuff, so then we had to go to more investors and get some more cash. We didn't raise a huge amount of money from investors because that was not the plan. The plan was more so we need to get some money so we don't go bankrupt in the next 6 months, right? Like, we don't have any sales coming in. You know, I didn't really pay myself for like 2 years because it's a startup, you can't. But we need to be able to afford, you know, parts. We need to be able to afford equipment. Need to be able to afford to go to these conferences. So yeah, finding more money from investors, that is a very difficult thing, and a topic for another day. But eventually, we used the feedback to design RASCube V2, which adds a whole lot more features to make it more engaging for the students. All right, what we found is that the students loved building RASCube V1, but once they built it, it was like, what do we do with it? You know, it's like, it's fun to build it, but then, you know, we have this $2,000 thing that's a paperweight. So we added more features to it to make it much more engaging, and have seen a lot more success from that. That's some of the, in the middle is the first kits being shipped. I think we pre-sold about 50 kits. And on the left is moving into our current workshop, which was a pretty awesome day. All right, that's RASCube V2. RASCube V2 is kind of our flagship product. That is like, we made the best product that we possibly could, and that's what a lot of schools are using. But eventually, a local company called FleetSpace they started up a STEM program, and they got a big government grant to get their STEM program into a lot of schools. And they said to us, we need to get a version of RASCube which is much cheaper so we can get them into as many schools as possible with the grant funds that we have. So then we developed RASCube LB, or RASCube Launchbox, for the Launchbox program that Fleet's developed. And this is one of the most recent things that happened, and this was one of the most fun things we've done, that's for sure, because suddenly we had an order for 1,250 RASCube kits to go to schools, and we didn't have long to design it and make it. So we literally manufactured 1,100 of the kits, the first 1,100, in 3 weeks. So we make these things in Adelaide at our workshop. We had to very, very quickly hire 15 uni students, train them up to do the soldering, train them to do the packaging, the programming, the testing. Some of them did things like CNC machining and laser cutting, and we built a production line in the workshop, and we worked shifts to make it happen. And then around that was me preparing all the parts to go into the production line. And there was a whole other thing to learn about that. Like, how do you make 1,100 satellite STEM kits in 3 weeks? Like, that's pretty fun. That was awesome. That was kind of true startup stuff. And eventually we get to 1,500 plus kits that we've now manufactured. In the bottom right there is the production team celebrating RASCube serial number 1,000. That was the 1,000th RASCube kit. When I started the business, I was like, if we sell 100 of these, like, I'll be pretty happy. That'd be pretty cool. So to get to 1,000 in under 3 years was, just beyond the dream, quite honestly. It was awesome. And then that's on the left is delivering some of those kits with our lead engineer to Fleet Space, who then distributed them to the schools. I don't think things show progression much more than the workshop. So we started with 6 square meters on the left there in the corner of my dad's shed in the Barossa. Very, very small. It's like the size of like a king bed. It's tiny. But that worked. As you can see on the bottom there, that was the first manufacturing run. All the foam and the laser cutters and stuff, making that happen. Then eventually one of our investors gave us 30 square meters. This, I kind of miss these days. This is like the most startup vibe you can get. Like, we literally built those workbenches with some scrap wood that we found that was going to be thrown in the rubbish. Like, we built all those workbenches in like a couple of hours. We worked in there through the summer, and it's in that warehouse, so it was like over 50 degrees Celsius in there. It was nuts. And yeah, it was like the most scrappy startup you could imagine. It was cool. And then eventually we got our current one, 130 square meters, much, much bigger. And then early next year we'll be moving to one about twice that size again. So things are progressing nicely. It's good to see that. One of the really cool things about running a business is you get to meet lots of really awesome people. In the top center, that guy there at the time was the head of NASA. He's literally the guy that reports to the US president directly. Like, within NASA, you don't get any higher. And he came to Adelaide, and we were invited to an event run by the space agency. I don't think we were meant to be invited, but we showed up anyway. Like, one of the attendees invited us. I think it was meant to happen. But anyway, we showed up to the event, and the NASA administrator, as he's called, he was there talking. And I could see the people from NASA were like paving an exit path for him. Like, when he finished, he didn't talk to anyone. He got rushed straight out of there onto wherever he's going next. I don't know. And I could see where that exit path was leading, so I went and I stood next to the door. So there's me, looking quite young at that stage, standing by the door with a big smile on my face, holding RASCube in my hand, holding this CubeSat. And he finishes talking. He walks past every single person in that room. All the people from the agency, all the big CEOs in the space sector, and he sees me standing at the door. And he goes straight, he locks eyes with me, straight to me, and has a conversation. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Standing there talking to the freaking head of NASA. Like, within the space sector, like, it doesn't get bigger than that, Oh, maybe Elon's bigger, but, it's pretty cool. And then in the bottom right, that is the second in charge at NASA, or was at the time as well. So that was at the same event, so that was pretty cool. Then there's, the deputy premier, the treasurer. There's lots of really cool people to meet in the process. Anyway, that's kind of the first half of the lecture. That is how we started the company side of it. Now, we're building these replica satellites that kids are using in the classroom, and we're telling the students, like, these are replica satellites. This is the same as the real thing. But how do we know that they're replicas if we don't actually build a real one and go to space? This is something that we needed to do to kind of prove a point to the students that this is real. And at the same time, something that personally, me and my team, who was mostly uni students, wanted to do. We wanted to prove that, you know, a group of students that don't know what they're doing can put something in space by just pure brute force and failure, right? So this kicked off RASCube 1. And the goal was to build this CubeSat, have experiments on board that were built by school students, put it on the unpressurized cargo of a space capsule. So it's still in space, still in a vacuum, same temperatures, launch it on a Falcon 9, and then have the space capsule actually bring it back home so that we could then hold that satellite after it's been to space, show students and say, this is a satellite, this went to space, and this is how similar it is to what you're using in the classroom. That was the big grand vision. 3 core objectives. I think I pretty much covered them already. The biggest one for us was learn how to do it and prove that we could do it. You know, when you're trying to, you know, find money from investors or government or customers to put student experiments into space, it's very difficult because it's like, how can we trust these guys to do this? But if we've already done it, then there's really no way of them saying no, right? So we had to prove that we could do it, we had to learn how to do it, so on, so on. So the mission profile was very, very unique in that it was only about 3 hours in space. It launched on the SpaceX rocket. It stayed attached to the space capsule, which was attached to the SpaceX's second stage. That went around Earth about twice, and then eventually re-entered and would parachute down into the ocean to get it back afterwards. Inside of it, of course, we have our circuit boards, our computers, our electronics, for us to learn how to actually power the whole thing and communicate with all the payloads that the students have built. Then we get to Jackson's Vexus board. Jackson was one of the main reasons we started the project. When we were thinking about doing the project, this 11-year-old from South Australia, 11 years old, Jackson, came to us at an event and said, you know, I've got this idea for a radiation experiment. Can you help me get it to space? And it sounds crazy, like who launches an 11-year-old kid's experiment to space? Like, but we thought about it and we're like, there's no reason we can't do it. You know, like think of one reason it can't be done, right? So we were like, sure, we'll make that happen. And that was one of the big driving factors which really made us get this project across the line. Project Space Cool is the biggest project on board. There was 7 high schools from 7 different countries that built experiments as part of Project Space Cool and put them inside of RASCube 1. Like these are students from Rwanda, Singapore, Colombia, Ukraine, USA, UAE, Australia, of course, who we worked with to build their experiments and put it onto this tiny cube in space. It's kind of symbolic in a way. All these schools around the world, from all different countries, all different backgrounds in this tiny cube orbiting our planet. That's some of the circuit boards inside. The top left was our computer. I think the bottom of it has much more circuitry. And then you can see a lot of the student experiments were quite basic, as you might expect. Like we can't expect students to design super high complexity, tiny components to go to space, right? So we had to work with them to design things that were kind of as basic as they could be, but still served like that purpose. Then, of course, to mount it to the space capsule, you can't just get a cube and put it on a space capsule. We need like an adapter plate, right? A special plate that mounts to the cube and then mounts the cube to the space capsule. So we figured, let's cut a void in this thing and just fill it with like pendants and jewelry, right? So there's a whole bunch of pendants that people purchased, some from my family, some from different supporters. There was a diamond ring for my girlfriend as well in there. You know, it'd be pretty special to get like a ring back from space, you know? Like that's like, not just space, but like orbit, like it's been around the planet. That's crazy. Yeah. All right, Q1 2023, we went public, we announced it publicly, and when you announce something publicly, then you really have to do it, right? Like we still didn't have any money for this project. We didn't know what the hell we were doing, but we announced it at a pretty big event at Lot 14, and we kind of had no choice from that stage. That's Jackson, the 11-year-old in the middle, and on the left is Hannah from the exploration company, who is a company in Germany who was building the space capsule. So they're based in Munich. Woo. Sorry, interesting glitches. There we go. Project Space Cool. This is some of the students around the world. Top left is the students in Rwanda. The 2 on the right are students in Colombia, and the one on the bottom left is students in Detroit. literally hundreds of students around the world worked to design, produce, program, test these experiments, ship them to us so that we would put it into this satellite, which I think is going to be one of the most kind of impactful STEM programs you can imagine. Here's some of the developments. I only put one slide for this. Obviously development took a long time. There's like thousands of photos of it, but for the sake of this, I was like, here's one slide. So we started in the second workshop in the top left. On the right, that's in the clean room, assembling some of the parts for that payload. And eventually we designed everything, we tested everything. Of course we failed a lot of boards didn't work, we had to remake them. But eventually we had all the parts manufactured, all the parts working, all the parts cleaned. So then we have to go into the clean room to actually build this, and this is how that went, if this plays nicely. There we go. Okay, so you can see we start by producing that adapter plate and putting all the pendants and stuff in it. Then we built the aluminium structure of it. Then we stacked up all the circuit boards, put all that together, put on the outside panels. There's lots of rules of things that you can and can't do in space. Like one of the first things we got from our launch provider is like a 50-page document about all the things that we have to, all the criteria we have to meet and all the things that we can't do. And then half the sentences of that link to more documents, and it just goes on and on. And one of the things you have to do is make sure it's enclosed. So if like a little electronic part comes off, it can't hit something else. One of the most interesting things is, of course, we have to get permits from the Australian Space Agency to launch it. And part of that is we literally had to sign a letter with the United Nations saying that we're not launching nuclear weapons to space. It's like, we're obviously not, right? It's a tiny cube, but they don't know that. As far as they're concerned, it's like it's a nuclear warhead. So just really interesting things like that you don't think of that come up along the way. And it's like, okay, we have to figure out how to do that. We have to figure out how to do that. At this point, we had the payload, we had the satellite built. We had it there in our hands, all built in the clean room. So then we have to test it. We have to prove that it can survive the conditions on the way to space and in space, both for insurance purposes and for our purposes. So the top left is vibration testing. This is vibrating it to about 2,000 hertz, so up and down 2,000 times. Basically, when the rocket launches, the rocket engines have such an intense vibration, and we need to prove that those rocket engines won't just tear apart our satellites. Top right is the most difficult one by far. That's EMC testing, electromagnetic compatibility, and this is measuring the invisible waves that come off of it to make sure we won't interfere with SpaceX's communications, and also measuring the communications from SpaceX bombarding our payload to make sure it won't interfere with us. Since you can't see any of this stuff and it doesn't really exist, it's just invisible waves, it makes it extremely complex. And we did fail those tests multiple times. And each time you fail it, you have to go back into the clean room, pull apart the satellite, figure out what's wrong, remake that circuit board, go back into the clean room. Then because you built it again, you have to redo the vibration testing, so to prove that it's been assembled properly, and then you can redo EMC testing, and I think we got third time lucky. So that was a crazy process. Bottom left is some thermal testing, and on the right, that's shock testing. So this is literally just a massive hammer, which hits a platform with the payload on it. We had to do shock testing to 1,400 Gs of force. Like a fighter pilot pulls about 9 Gs, right? Like 1,400 Gs is crazy. And when we did the test at the space test facility up at Mount Stromlo in Canberra, we actually reached 6,174 Gs of force, which is mind-blowing. Like I don't know, equivalent like TNT or something. It's crazy. An interesting story about that is when we were at the space test facility, we had to do 6 tests. And we'd done 5 tests successfully. We've got 1 test to go. If we fail this test, we're not going to space. There's no second chance. There's no time. There's no money left. We were almost bankrupt at this point. And this whole bunch of guys from NASA come in, like there's like 10 guys from NASA on this trip to Australia, walk into the National Space Test Facility, and they're like, ask me questions about it. And eventually I look at the facility manager and they're like, can we watch the test? And he turns to me and he's like, can they? Like, what am I going to do, say no to these guys? You know? So we all go up into the office behind the ballistic shields. And for me, like, this test has to work. This is the last test, the most complex test. And I'm standing there like this. I didn't breathe for about 2 minutes. It was like the most intense moment imaginable. These guys from NASA are like laughing, you know, having a good chat. Like, it's nothing, you know, it's just some kid's payload being tested, might explode, you know. But eventually, that test went well. They all said, good job, mate. You know, had a laugh and walked off, and things continued from there. But that was a super stressful moment. All these guys from NASA watching. This is how those tests actually went. Maybe. Here it is. Please play. Oh. I'm glad we're not live streaming this. That'd be really embarrassing. Here we go. You can see the shock testing is pretty violent. That hammer weighs a lot. If you want to watch these videos again, they're all up on YouTube, on the Robinson Aerospace YouTube channel. Yeah, as I said, not so easy. Like, these things do go wrong. And this is one example, like on the bottom right, that black spot is not meant to be there. That's like one of the parts literally exploded during the EMC testing. And we're like, why isn't the payload working? Pulled it apart, that's why it was literally on fire. Like, yeah, it's tough. But eventually, you just keep persisting, you keep persisting, you keep persisting. You watch the bank account go down, you go, ah, crap. You keep persisting, you keep persisting. But eventually, if you persist for long enough, you get it done, you box it up, and you ship it to Munich over in Germany. This is an interesting moment, very, very emotional. Like, we've truly put everything into this in terms of time, money, and every other stake you could possibly imagine. Like, this payload at this point means everything to us. And these guys pick it up and strap it on the back of a ute. You know, like, they could have at least put it in a van or something, but like, just on a ute. Like, I said to the guy, I'm like, this is a satellite. He's like, yeah, cool. You know, like, he could have been a bit nicer to it. But anyway, honestly, that was the last time I cried, was watching that thing get driven away, because it was like, at that point, there's nothing more we can do. Like, we put everything into this, and it either works or it doesn't. It's out of our control from this point. We don't see it again. We don't touch it again. You know, next time we see this is after it's launched and it comes back to us in the mail. It actually got stuck in customs in Munich for over a month in negative temperatures during their winter, which was a terrifying moment. This was like over like Christmas and New Year's, so like very stressful period. Like trying to contact all the customs brokers and stuff during, like on Christmas Day, literally. I was talking to these guys, trying to get it sorted out, because our satellite was just stuck in a warehouse at like -5 in Munich. There's nothing we can do about it, right? Like, this is crazy stuff. Eventually, it arrives at the exploration company. That's their space capsule, out of focus in the background, being assembled. They put it in the space capsule. This is the only photo of that I'm allowed to show you guys. But you can see some of the space capsule's electronics and cool hardware around the payload. At at the bottom of the cube, that little black bit, that's where the electrical connector was eventually plugged in, but I can't show you that. And at this point, we've done it. We've proven that it works through all the testing. We've got the permits from the Australian Space Agency. We've shipped it overseas, and they've put it into the space capsule, and we are ready for launch. This is a couple photos from launch day. On the left there, that is the SpaceX rocket with RASCube right in the top of it, going to space. It kind of came around full circle, right? Like I started back in year 10, seeing a SpaceX rocket land and getting inspired to get into space. And then here we are, 5 or 6 years later, with RASCube on top of a SpaceX rocket. So of course we hired this massive TV, these 6 speakers so we could feel the rocket like it was in the room. And that's me and my lead engineer with the trajectory of the payload while it's in space. So that's actually where it is. I think that was kind of just near Antarctica at that point. Anyway, the main event of the lecture, the next video, I think it's the next video, is how that launch actually went. After all this work, we get to finally watch this launch. It doesn't go for very long, but this is the result of all that hard work and the students' hard work and putting everything we had into making this possible against all odds. Here it is. Oh, that was a crazy workup. No, there's a few more slides. We'll put a pin in that. No. Here's a timeline. I won't read that out. Don't worry about that. You can take a photo if you want. But those are the main things involved with it. Kind of we went through this. We almost went bankrupt. We failed many tests. One of the test facilities' equipment actually broke, and we had scheduled to go overseas to NASA before we found another solution, stuck in customs. I think, I'm gonna check this time. This is definitely the video, yeah? Yes, it is. All right, sorry about that. This is the video, if it plays.
The satellite
there we go.
designed by a
21-year-old Australian is officially
in orbit after a successful SpaceX launch in the US.
It will perform experiments designed by students
From 7 countries, encouraging kids to dive into science.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. And liftoff of Falcon 9 goes, SpaceX goes, transport completed. Vehicle switching sales range. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
That's a pretty special moment. Puts a tear in the eye, doesn't it? I have no idea what slide's next at this point. What's next? Okay, as I kind of hinted, RASCube 2 is next. RASCube 1 was to learn how to do it and prove that we could do it. We did it, yay. So RASCube 2 is next. I can't say too much about the details of that at this point. We'll get to that eventually. RASCube 3 is also booked in with the launch provider, and that will literally put student experiments onto the lunar surface by the end of the decade. Bold claim, but we literally have the contracts in place to do that. Next is RASCube 2, so that's the big focus right now. And then once we've done that, then we'll shift focus to the moon. But that's the big goal at this point, is let's get experiments built by high school students onto the moon this decade, which will be pretty crazy. And of course, while this is happening, we've got more and more kits going into schools. We've got the launch box program happening with Fleet Space. So if any of you know any schools, high schools particularly, that are interested in this kind of stuff, then please let them know about what we're doing. I would love to chat with them and see if they want to have their students literally building satellites in the classroom. Yeah, any questions from the audience at this point? I could talk all day about this stuff, but I better not. Yep.
Just one over here.
Sure.
Hello, that's pretty fantastic. The really enjoyed your whole presentation, but there is one question I need to ask you.
Sure.
Give us an idea of just one of the experiments. What are the experiments?
Oh, yes, sure. Missed a kind of important part there, didn't I?
I think so.
Yeah. So obviously Jack knows the radiation stuff, and then the other schools, they actually worked together to design a Morse code communication experiment. So what that looks like is the school from Rwanda will transmit a word in Morse code to the school from Singapore, right? That word might be the word freedom. The school from Singapore would then receive that, translate it to their language, and then transmit it to the next school. Kind of like a game of Chinese whispers, or telephone as more commonly known. For these students, it's not really about the data. Like at the end of the day, they don't care about the data. They just want to be part of something big. They want to design stuff that literally goes into space. And that's what Project Space Cool was. It was bringing all these students together, working together to be able to communicate with each other within that tiny cube. Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's very, very impressive. Are you tracking any of the students' careers? That be the objective is to convert someone who probably wouldn't go into space to actually go into a career in space, and that might be some good data for you to get some more money from the government.
It's very tricky to do that. For us, that would be the holy grail.
Teachers would probably be on board with that.
Yeah.
The school teachers.
We have recently seen some students who used the initial RASCube V1 kits go on to actually pursue careers, pursue STEM degrees in university. So that's been good to see. As for the ones launching to space, it literally just happened like a month ago. So we'll see what happens with that. Yeah, we'll do our best to track the data, but it's complex. These are schools on the other side of the planet, and these students, move on from high school quite quickly after these things happen. So we'll see how much data we're able to get.
Well, email makes it very easy these days. So.
Yeah, makes it easier. Yeah.
And have you also been to the large corporations like BAE and Raytheon and companies like that?
Yeah, we've had discussions with a few. One idea that we have is like sponsored kits. So one of the larger contractors would purchase 10 RASCube kits that would then be given to a school who might not otherwise be able to access it. Like a school in a remote place or a low socioeconomic area. We haven't pursued that too seriously yet, just because of time commitments. We're very, very overworked at the moment. But that would be one option in the future for sure.
Yep, cool, thank you.
Question at the back.
Cool.
Earlier you had the QR code on screen and I didn't get time to get that. So could we have that up at the end perhaps?
Yep.
And I was also wondering whether the planetarium or some place like that has a connection with you guys, because I know a number of years ago now, before this started, I went to the planetarium quite regularly. So you'd be likely to find people who might be able to tell their schools about this and might even want to get one themselves individually, get in contact with them there.
That's a good point, actually. I hadn't thought of that. At this point, we're not connected with the planetarium at all. We are connected with various not-for-profits and companies. There's this whole space education mini-sector, as I call it, forming, with a lot of not-for-profits and companies working on space education in various formats, because people are starting to see that it is a very exciting and engaging way to teach STEM. But the planetarium, yes, I should reach out to them and see if I can meet with someone there. That's a good idea.
I've got a question from me, perhaps the last one. Sure. Going right back to when you were a little boy, obviously space fascinated you, and we've just been talking about the planetarium and stars and things like that. Can you think perhaps right back to where it all started for you? I know you looked at the rocket launch, but way back.
I think like every kid's excited about space. you know, and a lot of kids eventually they kind of lose that excitement as they start to grow up. And so did I. I think SpaceX kind of reignited that excitement for me. I never met my grandfather on my mum's side, but he was a fascinating person in that he made a lot of things. Kind of making stuff like I did. Like he literally like hand carved his own telescope lenses. Like he got the glass and he carved the lens into himself and he built this telescope. I've never seen it, I've only heard about it. But you know, but even before me, there was, you know, people in my family that were doing, you know, pretty exciting stuff with their hands. So, you know, I wouldn't say I contributed to it, considering I never actually got to meet him, but I heard about him a lot, and I think his story was quite fascinating.
Thanks very much. It's probably in the DNA if we look deep enough.
Yep.
Further question here.
Awesome.
Sorry. Roughly how much are the cubes, the training ones as such, and have you thought about going out to non-educational groups that do this STEM process?
Yeah, so the kits, the RASCube V2 kits are about $2,000 each. The more you buy, the cheaper they get, of course. The kits, for the schools, it's not really about the kits, it's about the programs that come with the kits. We have an education team of very experienced teachers who make lesson plans for maths and physics and digital tech and geography. And that's really what the teachers are actually buying into, is those lesson plans that use RASCube to teach these STEM subjects in a more engaging, hands-on, exciting way. As for non-education, the different markets that we work with, primarily high schools, also universities. We do have quite a few cybersecurity companies that are using RASCube to do crazy stuff that I don't understand. We've thought about the idea of hosting workshops, like sessions with RASCube at our workshop that would be for anybody. We haven't pursued those as of yet because our workshop is a little bit too small to do that. So hopefully, like mid next year when we're settled into our larger workshop, we'll set up an area where we have some desks and people can actually come in from, you know, not just from schools, but anyone can come in and actually use the RASCube kits.
Any further questions out there? I don't see any. Look, I think we can all see Edward's amazing energy for his project. And yeah, I'm astounded. If, in common with most of the audience here, I expect that when we think back to what we were doing when we were 21, 22, and looking at what Edward's achieved, it's truly amazing. Look, I'm sure we'll watch Edward's journey with great interest. We've now seen him in action, we've seen his energy, and to power him into the future as a son of the Barossa, I'm sure he will appreciate this small token of our gratitude. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please thank Edward?
Thank you.
Thank you, Edward.
I've got lots of key tags as well. If anyone's like a free space key tag, come find me afterwards.
And I'll make sure to leave the QR code as the final slide when I've finished my stuff. So, just going to make sure that the QR code comes in at the very end. But great, thanks, Scott. Yeah, despite the first